Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I am Scott McMahon, and this should be a good show. I've got I'm going to be talking about primarily. I'm going to be focusing on the state Republican parties, the precinct strategy, and its influence on the division that exists between state parties. There was a video that Michelle Posey from Sarasota County, which is Flynn's home county in Florida, that she put out claiming that they were purging all the MAGA from the party. And that what she neglects to share is that the people that are purging her and those linked to her are MAGA also. And so it's rather confusing. And you've got two groups within the party that ideologically are actually, if they stopped with their power struggles, they'd see that they're all aligned on just about everything. But I have argued quite a bit over the last year that this is actually an insurgency. And so I'm going to kind of present my case, and I'm going to go into a deep dive into the influence of Dan Schultz in this whole thing, and what who he is, what his story is, and all that. Before I get to that, I want to just look at something that I've been going over to Blue Sky just to see what Democrats are saying when they think that they're not being watched. And it's kind of fun. I don't have an account there. I'm just kind of, being a wallfly over there at Blue Sky. So let me pull up something that I'm seeing that Democrats are talking about. And I think it's pretty valuable to see. I don't think that this is a serious threat, but a lot of Democrats are talking about this. And I've been told that some Democrats with power are talking about it, and they're trying to get this to happen in order to stop certification of Trump on January 6th. So let's just look at what they're doing. And again, I don't think that this is a serious threat. I think that it would be political suicide on the part of the Democrats to do this. But let's go ahead and look at it. So this is Blue Sky. It's kind of boring. There's not, it's just a feed. And but I just searched 14th Amendment Section 3, which is what they're claiming gives them the constitutional authority to prevent Trump's his confirmation or a certification on January 6th. And that Section 3 of, let me pull it up right here. Section 3 says, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial member of any officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So what this is, what the context of the 14th Amendment is, it was passed after the Civil War. And what they were saying, and the context of this is that those who were part of the Confederacy could not take place, or that they could not be elected. They were disqualified from holding office in the federal government. And that's what this section of the 14th Amendment was about. But Democrats are arguing, and there's a lot of it. It goes on and on and on and on. There's a lot of it. Whoops. I hope I didn't lose this video. It's a little glitchy. Blue Sky is. I think it's just a matter of time before they all come back, because there's not all that much engagement. But so this person right here, just one example, is that the 14th Amendment Section 3 bars anyone who engaged in insurrection from holding office. Trump incited the January 6th attack, violating his oath. He should be disqualified. Now, I think that most of us, if we're on the right and if we voted for Trump and support Trump, we would say, well, it wasn't an insurrection. And I would agree with that. And there was a Supreme Court ruling earlier this year that I've talked about a few times, where the Colorado Secretary of State tried to, by fiat, declare that Trump was an insurrectionist. Therefore, she didn't need to put him on the ballot. And that went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court fairly quickly ruled that she can't do that for multiple reasons, one of which was that one person can't just decide that someone committed insurrection. That would take an act of Congress, or a criminal conviction. And so, yeah, and I think that really it would take an act of Congress. And so there are Democrats that are arguing that insurrection has been mentioned in a civil suit against Trump, and that the judge actually called it insurrection in a civil suit. It wasn't a conviction. I definitely don't think that the Supreme Court would uphold it if they were to do this, but it's out there. So, and it's really kind of funny because they claim these, that Trump is a threat to democracy, and yet they really don't care that the people voted, and the people know about what happened on January 6th, and they still voted for Trump. And really what that means to me, and I think it's pretty clear that it means, is that the people have judged for themselves that this was not an insurrection, the majority of Americans. So that's that. I'm going to turn my mic volume down. I just want to, because I'm going to be playing some videos, and I want to make sure that you can hear it so that you can turn your volume up a little bit, and hopefully it matches the volume coming out of the video. So, so that's that. I just kind of wanted to bring that up because, really what it would take is Congress, that Democrats, I believe, are trying to court actual rhinos in Congress to come to their side and join them and say Trump is disqualified from office because he committed insurrection. And Trump still, he's not inaugurated yet, and I think he is still trying to go big tent. And this kind of leads in with the Mar-a-Lago thing last night, and which is something that was planned back in September, October. And when it was planned, I saw it immediately that this was, in the event that Trump wins, that this was an effort for Flynn to just try to sidle up next to him and try to worm his way into the White House in some way. Maybe it worked. I don't know. I mean, he's very good at the influence ops, and Trump does appear to have a weakness for anyone who flatters him. And so, maybe Trump will give him a job. I have no idea. And does that mean that anything that I've reported on, or any other people that have reported on about Flynn, is wrong? No, I don't think so. In fact, I think that what it does is it underscores the importance of investigative journalism going forward. And, I will only continue in doing what I'm doing. I have no animus or anything against Flynn. I think that, but I do think that he has done a lot of wrong, and he is clearly not who he says he is and who his followers say that he is. So to that end, let's talk about Sarasota County.
Oh my gosh, guys, stop scrolling right now. You have to listen to this. You're not going to believe it. Did you know the Republican Party of Florida is trying to purge MAGA from within the party? That's right. Under the leadership of Evan Power, the Republican Party of Florida is trying to suspend and remove and purge MAGA people from the Republican Party of Florida. Even though this is a clear violation of Florida state statute, why are they doing this? Use the number below to reach out to Evan Power with the Republican Party of Florida and tell him to stop the MAGA purge.
Stop the MAGA purge. So, This is Michelle Posey, and she was an actress, from what I understand, before getting in with no experience at all in politics, before being recruited. And I've talked about that quite a bit, like with Christina Caramo, Carrie Lake. They like to find people who are good actors, good speakers, that's one of their primary qualifications, that they can influence and put into a position of power, make them feel important, make them feel like they're doing the Lord's work, and then put them in, tell them that, what they need to do is, kick out all the rhinos. So she definitely fits that bill. And the whole argument here is that she's MAGA and everybody that's kicking her out is not MAGA. And of course, she naturally does not go into the cause of this. And because there certainly is cause. And I have been talking to people within the Republican Party of Florida uh, for the last few months. I've got some sources and friendships there in Florida, and um, in a nutshell, in Florida, there's FRA, which is the Florida Republican Assembly, and thank you, Liberty. So I'm going to kind of get into that. There's Florida Republican Assembly, and there is the Republican Party of Florida. And they are two very separate organizations. The Republican Party of Florida is naturally, by its name, it is the Republican Party. The Florida Republican Assembly likes to pretend like it is the Republican Party. And it is very overtly, in the videos that I've seen, the content that they put out, they are very overtly Christian nationalist. They want to try to, purge the country and the state of evil, which, certainly I think that would be a good thing to do for there to be less evil in the world, but that's not our job to do that. And that's certainly not government's job to do that. It is the government's job to enforce laws, but to just say, to declare what is evil and to try to purge that, that's not the government I think that we want to live in. That's pretty tyrannical. And I have argued quite a bit that Christian nationalism is the desire to make this a Christian nation, and that there's only two ways to do that, because we will never see, until Jesus Christ returns to this earth and judges all sin and wipes away all sin from the earth, there will be no Christian nation. The only two ways to accomplish that is to use the murderous power of government to kick out everybody that's not a Christian, or to use the murderous power of government to force false professions of Christ. And both have been attempted numerous times throughout history, and it has always resulted in complete and total tyranny and widespread murder. And so Christian nationalism is in every way a bad idea. It is completely repulsive to the majority of voters in this country, and that's part of the point. Because if they can put forward candidates that could not win a general election, then that is one way to flip red states blue, which I have argued quite a bit is one of the apparent intentions behind the Flynn operations within state Republican parties. So the cause is that FRA has been putting out messaging and narratives that, in a similar way to what the Flynn Network has done, where they were putting out throughout Trump's campaign, they were putting out narratives about, trying to disenfranchise Republican voters, tell them that they are that it's all fraud, it's hopeless, it's really promoting despair and hopelessness, and which was very contradictory to a winning message that Trump was really promoting, which is, we're going to be too big to rig. And you never heard too big to rig from the Flynn Network, as an example. But Florida FRA, Florida Republican Assembly, was doing somewhat, pretty similar messaging, and promoting Christian nationalism. Liberty says maybe they're just trying to fix our elections. Are you saying that their primary goal is to claim that they're Christian nationalists and not to fix elections? So yeah, they talk about fixing elections, but do they actually do anything to fix elections? What have they actually done? that has made our election systems more secure. So in Florida, for example, what they were doing was they were teaching how to hand count ballots, but there's no provision in law for hand counting ballots. And I heard from someone in Florida that the leadership there was actually saying in private conversations that that they needed to um, learn how to hand count ballots because Flynn was saying, and Patrick Byrne actually said this on an X Space too, a week before the election, that there wasn't going to be an election on election day because there's going to be an EMP attack or some sort of widespread power outage caused by terrorism or something. And so, we need to be prepared by knowing how to hand count ballots. And so instead of doing get out the vote and all that, they were teaching people how to hand count ballots. This is just one of many different examples, but yeah, Bradley says nothing. There is nothing that they have done. In fact, what the whole election integrity movement has done is defame the election integrity movement. They have driven out everybody, all of the honest players and people who are doing honest investigations. They repeat false assertions endlessly, like the machine fraud narrative, the machine fraud psyop, and they focus on solutions that are not solutions, that are unattainable. And instead of looking at the voter rolls, for example, and removing dead voters from the voter rolls, or focusing on voter ID, or make sure that only citizens can vote, which are the types of lawsuits that Michael Whatley, the chair of the RNC, was filing all across the country. He was forcing states to follow their state laws. That is something that improves election integrity. But you never saw anything like that from the Flynn election integrity experts. That these people, they always claim to be the election integrity experts. They prey on our emotions over the belief that the 2020 election was stolen, which I do believe that Biden did not get 81 million votes. But they prey on our emotions in order to manipulate us into following them, and that's a big part of their game. Bradley says the Florida voting system is the most secure, by the way, and which is exactly, it is definitely one of the better ones in the whole country. And so why these people are so concerned about election integrity in Florida is just, that's kind of strange. It's a little bit of a head scratcher. And yeah, so, and not that there isn't fraud and election fraud and voter fraud in Florida. I'm sure there is, but they do have certainly some of the better systems in the whole country. And so the solutions, it's a lot of it is just it's a distraction technique. They're trying to, one thing you never see them talk about is the things that we need to do as members of the Republican Party in order to earn people's votes. They always talk about how votes are counted. They don't talk about, what you actually have to do as a candidate and as a party to earn voters' votes. And I think that's a really, really important distinction. Liberty says Florida has a lot of problems still. Are you familiar with Michelle Swinnock? Yes, I am definitely familiar with Michelle Swinnock. In fact, I will share. I think Michelle Swinnock is in my opinion part of the problem, and so yeah, I have a clip. I might not be able to find it quickly. I have a clip somewhere on my computer of Michelle Swinnock, but she calls everybody demons. She's definitely a Christian nationalist, and yeah, I do not. She's been a very strong promoter of the machine fraud narrative and a lot of false narratives around election integrity. She's close with Ann Vandersteel and the whole Flynn network. So what I want to share now is, Dan Schultz, he had the precinct strategy, and that Bradley says, call everyone your own party a traitor, and deep state rhino isn't a winning solution. Exactly. And that's exactly what they do. And so, it was kind of funny with Michelle Posey. I called her out, and maybe she doesn't, I don't follow her closely at all. I I spent about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, I spent quite a bit of time looking at her videos and historical that, her archives and stuff. I spent quite a bit of time looking at it. I don't know what she's talking about now because, I was watching her material in order to better understand what was going on within the Arizona Republican Party, because she has a lot of guests that are a huge part of the problem in Arizona. So, I don't know, is strictly administrative. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Michelle Swinick is doing exactly, and yeah, so that is that. I would say that from what I have seen from all of the people that in Arizona, as I've studied Arizona, that I really have not seen any solutions come out of that group at all. I haven't seen any legislation come out of that group that has really helped. I have not seen solutions. So there's a lot of complaining and there's a lot of discouraging voters, but I don't see any real solutions. So with Michelle Posey, I kind of pointed this out. I retweeted this video. I said, except that this isn't really MAGA. I think, if you really want to go and create a lot of chaos and call everybody that doesn't, you know, that won't let you just take over the party. If you want to call them all rhinos, then maybe you should go do that in the Democrat Party. And she got a little upset. We had quite a back and forth. It's all on my X. Definitely encourage you watch it. I'll post a link in it in my Substack show notes. I thought that was a lot of fun. But my comment on her post got 3 times as many likes as her post did, and she kept saying, "Why doesn't anybody care that the party's purging us?" Well, yeah, I think it's all a victim narrative, and they use a lot of that. So a lot of this has its roots in the precinct strategy. Dan Schultz was an Army intelligence officer, and he in 2009 he started talking about the precinct strategy. He created precinctstrategy.com. In 2020, he became friends with a guy named Robert Beatles out of Reno, Nevada. And Robert Beatles is, as far as I understand, he's a, excuse me, allergies. He's like a crypto millionaire, and he helped him to build his website and some other things. So Robert Beatles is kind of part of the energy behind and the support behind Dan Schultz. But Dan Schultz, what made him famous was Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon brought Dan Schultz on his show for the first time on February 6th, 2021. And so this was 10 days after Biden's inauguration. People were, I think, especially Bannon's audience, had kind of bought into a lot of the ideas about, somehow this is all, this stolen election was it was not going to get certified, and then it got certified, and then somehow Biden's not going to get inaugurated. Then he got inaugurated, but the whole time, Bannon and many others, but Bannon in particular was in a pretty calculated way, inciting people towards rhino hatred, the whole idea of rhino hatred. And I think that all of that was very deliberate. And I've also talked about how and why I believe that Steve Bannon was compromised by the CCP through Miles Guo, who is a CCP, a PLA agent, or at least he has. When the FBI raided his apartment or condo in New York City, they found lots of materials that strongly suggested that he was a PLA agent. And I had Solomon Yu on my show, and Solomon, who was a 24-year RNC committeeman from Oregon, and he was a dissident from the CCP. He fled when he was a teenager after criticizing communism in school in China, and so his parents knew that his life was in danger, and so they were able to get him to Alaska, and then he ended up penniless as a teenager, got himself an education, and Taught himself English. He didn't know anything when he arrived, and it's an amazing American success story. But he kind of fancies himself as an investigator into CCP infiltration. And he started watching Solomon Yu and his Chinese language broadcasts that were going back to China, and he was talking about openly in Chinese that he was taking advantage of Americans, and he was praising President Xi, and basically the exact opposite of what he was saying on Bannon's show. And that was throughout 2020. And Bannon got a lot of material benefit from Miles Guo. And he actually did his show from during the lockdowns in New York. He did the show from Miles Guo's yacht in New York Harbor. And even Mike Flynn was paid. And I've shown where he was paid, I think $25,000, or was it 50,000? It might have been $50,000 that he was paid for a single speech that he was paid by Miles Guo. And so, yeah, I think that there was some compromise. I don't know if the CCP was behind this, but there certainly was some level of compromise. I do believe that there was some premeditation on Bannon's part in setting up the field, kind of preparing the field, preparing the soil for Dan Schultz to come on a show on February 6th, where he said, and this is an exact quote, he said, the problem is all the rhinos within the Republican Party. The solution is we need to invade. He said this in exact words: invade and take over the Republican Party, kick out all the rhinos, and we need more precinct delegates and precinct committeemen, and the slots are empty, and we just need to get in there and fill them up. And then at the same time, there were operatives in states all over the country that were setting up organizations to inboard to receive these leads, because they were creating massive quantities of leads. This was he was on 2 to 3 times a week. Dan Schultz was on Steve Bannon's show, and he was on other shows, but really it was Steve Bannon that was heavily promoting this. And Posobiec was as well. But they were heavily promoting the precinct strategy. And even to this day, on the day that Steve Bannon got out of prison, his very first show, one of the first things he talked about was the precinct strategy. So this is still something that's very important. It is still a priority to Bannon. And Dan Schultz is continuing to share the same exact message. I'm going to start, before I get into what I'm going to share about him, or the longer video that I'm going to share. I'm going to start with just a very recent video. This was, I think it was earlier this year, and this is where he says, it just shows that he's continuing with the same message.
Okay, why are my buttons upside down? That's a distress signal. Why? Because over half of these slots, as far as I know, everywhere in the country still are vacant. In Maricopa County, only 49.8% of the 7,542 Republican Party precinct committeeman slots are going to be filled via the primary election on July 30th, because only of the 7,500.
Okay, so he's not a very good speaker, but he's not very engaging, and maybe that's part of the reason why Steve Bannon hasn't had him back. But I don't know. It's been some time that Steve Bannon has not had Dan Schultz back on his show. But Dan Schultz is continuing every single day. Like, this is his. I don't know if he sees it as his ministry. I don't know if this is something that he's part of the whole. If he's actually an asset in some way of the military intelligence, the military industrial complex. I don't know if he's directed to do what he's doing, but I do know that what he's doing, he's been doing. He was an Army intelligence officer. There's not much. There's nothing published that I've been able to find that talks about exactly when or where he was stationed, or what he did in his military career. But he was an Army intelligence officer. He's admitted to that. and that he's been talking about this since 2009, since the Tea Party days. And I think that starting in 2009, there was one person that really took what Dan Schultz said seriously, was in Washington State. His name is Matt Shea. Matt Shea was a Ron Paul libertarian and a Christian nationalist, and he took this message and he organized a large group of people, and they took over the Washington State Republican Party. When they did that, when they started back in 2009, the state House and Senate were split. So the Republicans had the majority in one of the chambers, and Democrats had the other. Now it's like Democrats have 2/3 of both of them, and it's just complete Democrat territory. You could argue that, well, a lot of Californians have moved to Oregon and Washington, and over the last 20 years, and so there's a demographic factor in that, and that may be, but I also think that really that they were using the same language. They were talking about taking over the party. They called themselves the grassroots. They used the same Saul Alinsky type tactics, extremely aggressive in taking over. It was a complete and total power structure. They create a collectivist bloc, a group, to all vote in a collectivist fashion, and the pitch is basically join the party and go to the monthly meetings and vote the way we tell you to, and we'll take over the party and save the state and the country for future generations. That's the pitch. So what I'm going to share now is I'm going to go ahead and go into some depth with this, and which we can do in this longer format. And I think that this is really valuable. There was an event in South Carolina, and I'm not sure the exact date. It was about a year and a half ago. I think probably about a year and a half ago. And it was organized primarily by Keith Blandford, who's one of the lead insurgents in South Carolina. The other is Jeff Davis in Greenville County. But at this event, there was the first speaker was Mike Flynn. He was remote. He called in, but he spoke for about a half hour. And then you had Boone Cutler, you had Mark Fincham. There was it was the whole crowd. I don't have the whole program, but it was definitely a Flynn organization, a Flynn group. Wano Savin was there. And so yeah, it was definitely a Flynn org, but really the focus of the whole thing, it was called the America First Forum. And you can, if you look it up, South Carolina America First Forum, you could probably find it. All the videos are online. But I think that right in the middle of it was Dan Schultz. And I think Dan Schultz was really kind of like the grease or the fuel, the kind of the purpose of the whole event, which was how do we take over the South Carolina Republican Party? And so the message that he had is a message that it's the same message that he gives to every state. So I took his 20 to 30 minute presentation. I cut out all the gaps and ahs and whatever. And then there were other issues during his presentation. So I kind of just boiled it down to 8 minutes. So we're going to go through that, watch this 8-minute video, and I'm going to stop it periodically and just kind of break it down.
Take over the Republican Party, and it's there for the taking in almost every state. Over half of the slots are vacant. So we have to fill up all of them, and we got to do it as soon as possible.
Okay, so the problem is that he always goes back to is that there's too many vacant slots within the Republican Party, and we've got to fill them up, and he's comes right out and says that we got to take over the Republican Party.
Tell people, look, it only takes 3 hours a month to be an effective precinct committeeman. You go one meeting a month. That's it. You learn the ropes at the meetings. The two major obstacles: we don't have enough people, and we don't have them massed where they need to be massed. There's a principle of warfare called mass. Those troops have to be massed. Where do we mass once a month? At our local Republican Party committee meeting.
All right, so this is that to me that is pretty astounding. So he's actually using military terminology to mass all of these precinct delegates or precinct committeemen. They need to be masked. He's describing a collectivist voting bloc, and he says, this isn't a position of responsibility. All you have to do is just go to it's just 3 hours a month. Just that's all it is. Just go to the meetings. You'll learn the ropes at the meetings. So he's also recruiting people that don't know anything about the party, and it's fine. And I encourage people who don't know anything about the party to get involved in the party, but it's not. And I'm going to talk more about what the position really is. It is not what he's saying it is. It is a position of responsibility, not rights, but he's got it upside down.
Florida, for example, brags about its system. It's incredibly expensive, and it's electronic, and I believe it's fraught with the same problems that we have, like in Arizona, where I'm from. So here's the goal, Mark.
So you can see, and he does more, and I cut some of it out. He goes on and on about election fraud, and his theories about election fraud. But he uses that it's a means of emotional manipulation.
Fincham mentioned it. Hand-counted paper ballots, no machines, mailed ballots only for military and confirmed invalids, small precincts, and a one-day election. Why didn't they get it done? Well, they're not afraid of us, we the people, because there's not enough of us in the Republican Party in Arizona. My precinct's full, 10 slots, all 10 are full. But my legislative district, it's at 50%. Maricopa County is at 38.8%. Pima County, the next biggest county, is at 37.7%. They're not afraid of us. They're not afraid of conservatives because we're not united.
So there he goes again. You have to be afraid, and he's trying to create a collectivist voting bloc.
Every Republican Party precinct committeeman slot should be filled by a conservative. If you ask me for my time for politics, I think to myself, is my time going to be used to recruit even one more precinct committeeman? And if the answer to that question is no, I won't do it. That's all I focus on, because we've got to fill up all of these slots. So here's a common sense solution, okay, for voting. I drew that. The people who vote on election day, where do their ballots go? They don't go to a hand count system. They go into this black box machine. Nobody knows what happens inside.
So this is, just think about this from a psychological perspective. So what he's saying, it should be just the simple thing. The ballots are printed and then people vote and then they're hand counted and then we have the results the same day. And, so he presents that like it's this simple thing. And then, but here's what we really have. And it's this ugly, complicated thing. And we've got to change it. And we can fix our elections and vote in one day and have the results the same day. And he gives this ridiculously, just absurdly, overly simplified economic explanation that how it would be so much cheaper if we hand counted ballots rather than use the machines, and all of his assumptions are just completely bad. In Arizona, for example, in this last election, there were 79 different ballot options on the ballot in many of the precincts and in many cities and precincts. It was a double-sided. It was 2 pages double-sided. It was a huge ballot. Hand counting that would have taken just as long as what they did. And the reason why it took so long is because they were going back and curing ballots and all this stuff, which, clearly all of that needs to change. There's improvements that we need to make. And yes, there are problems, but from a psychological perspective, what they're doing here, what Dan Schultz is doing here is, he's using people's strongest feelings about the elections and saying, you have no hope unless the only way to save our country, because our country is at risk because we can't have fair elections because our election system's bad and the machines are all black boxes, and he calls it black box machines, and so we have no transparency, we have no fairness in our elections, And so the only way to change that is to take over the Republican Party and become a precinct delegate. And there we go. Bradley says, if you take your ballot to Florida precinct with your ID, you scan your own ID and ballot into the machine and remove it with a receipt, and then deposit the ballot and bin for verification if needed later, unless it's changed. Yeah. And so, I think that, I think we definitely need tabulators. Tabulators are just scanners. And I think we need tabulators. And I think, and I've talked about, a few weeks ago, I talked about kind of what I think is a good prescription for fixing our election systems. And the focus should be transparency and security, and fixing the voter rolls. And so I've talked about that at length. That's not what I want to get into here.
That machine. And then for the mailed ballots is even worse. This system is designed with these black box machines and vote by mail to steal elections and then prevent evidence. There's about 400,000 of these slots, about 200,000 are vacant, and it hasn't changed, okay? So, but whose fault is that? I don't blame the RNC because they don't want us, right? I blame conservatives. We got to learn this stuff, and we got to start recruiting in earnest.
Okay, so, and this what he's saying right here is that, we're half moderates. It's all moderates and conservatives, and this is an expression of what I believe is Marxist dialectical materialism, which is the view that it's an us them worldview, a black white worldview. It's the world's against us. The ones in power need to be removed from power, and that's the cause of all of our problems. This is the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, which was the language that Marx used, and the working class was the proletariat. They were the victims of the bourgeoisie who have all the power. The solution that's needed is we need to kick out the ones in power, and then we can save the country or whatever. But what the result of this is not freedom. It's conflict, it's chaos, and he's using the language of chaos and conflict. And if we look at this, that's why I'm spending so much time on this, because this really is the seed and the cause of the division within the parties. It's not what he calls the moderates. Because in my experience, that the moderates supported Trump. They support the nominee. They want to, they know how to, the people that they call moderates, they're not even necessarily moderates. They've just been there longer. They know how things work. A lot of them came in with the Tea Party and were, considered far right when they came in with the Tea Party. And a lot of what this is the exact same thing that's happened to the Democrat Party over the last 20 years, where the Democrat Party was systematically infiltrated. They moved the goalposts further and further to the left. They created a deliberate cult within the party that if you didn't follow those goalposts, you didn't follow everything as it was moving, the transgenders, the gay marriage that, is one thing at a time, moving the goalposts farther and farther to the left, then you weren't a Democrat. And so people were afraid, and they created this culture of fear and used that culture of fear to move the goalposts farther and farther to the left to alienate as many people as possible. And that's exactly what this is. And it's hard for me to believe that Dan Schultz doesn't know that that's what he's doing. He's been doing this for so long, and he's using this language very systematically. He has training in military intelligence, and this is, and he was speaking here at this America First Forum in South Carolina with he had followed Mark Fincham, and before that, either right before or right after that, was Boone Cutler, Juan O'Savin, Mike Flynn. So he is very clearly associating with this whole Flynn network. He's a part of it. Or Farm Girl says they just try to get people to destroy their own institutions in order to take them over. And that's exactly what Saul Alinsky talks about in community organization. He says in his book, Rules for Radicals, that community organization, the first step in community organization is community disorganization. you can't, he's saying what we want to create is not just an improved system. We need a completely different system. And so in order to create a completely different system, we have to destroy the system that we have now. And so the first step in community organization is community disorganization. And that's exactly what they're doing with this whole belief that, and he calls them here in this presentation conservatives, but they always call themselves the grassroots. So Michelle Posey calls herself the grassroots. They always call themselves the grassroots. Sometimes they add an adjective to it. So like they're the real grassroots. In Arizona, they often call themselves the ultra grassroots. In Missouri, they call themselves the truly grassroots for Trump. And they always try to say that they're the only ones that support Trump. It's all nonsense. It's not. That's just not the case. But they're creating a psychology of division. And that's exactly what Dan Schultz is doing here. So let me continue.
Let's see if we turn that blue red. Now it looks like this: 75% voting majority, full strength party. And guess what those moderates will do? Let's call them moderates instead of, rhinos. Let's call them moderates. You know what they'll do? Like they usually do when they're outnumbered. They take their ball and go home. Bye, Felicia. So they don't want us. It's obvious. So
that's exactly what they do. They go in, they utilize Solinsky tactics. They assassinate their character. They make their lives as difficult as they can possibly be. And then they get them to say bye, because they get them to give up, because they make the meetings instead of an hour or too long, but with their points of order. They use Robert's Rules of Order as a weapon to disrupt the meeting, especially if there's an election in the meeting. And they know they don't have the numbers going into it. They know that if they can string it along and get that meeting to go past midnight, then at least a third of the people are going to give up and go home. And those third of the people that are going to give up and go home are the normal people that work a job, or older people that have been there longer, and then they'll end up winning the election. It's happened countless times. That's how they just took over. Brian Ferentz just took over LD3 in Arizona using that exactly. So let's go on.
Look, I say it on a slide coming up. Let's not get mad about it. Let's get even. Let's take over the Republican Party. And then this is the communications and collaboration platform that Robert Beatles, who's in Washoe County, Nevada, has built for us, and it's going to get better and better and better. I was just on a Zoom call yesterday with one of the programmers.
Okay, so and this is what they do. They use and again, he mentions Robert Beatles, and Robert Beatles is definitely an instigator. There's plenty, if you look him up, there's plenty of video of him disrupting meetings and stuff. He's a pretty angry and hostile person, at least in the videos that I've seen. And what they do is they create these communications channels. They often use Telegram or Signal, or they use, I don't know if they're actually using his system here at precinctstrategy.com, but they use systems that they can control, where if people, and this happens, I've talked to people in every state that I've looked at, I've heard this story, that they use these channels of communication in order to, as gatekeepers, to control the flow of information. So when people start asking questions to challenge the assumptions that they're being told to have, one of them is never trust the outsiders, right? This is part of how you establish a cult. They say that there's enemies all around. There's enemies everywhere. You can't trust anybody. It's the deep state. It's the globalists. And that all the rhinos, they're trying to take over the state. They're trying to take over the party. They're trying to purge the real MAGA, just like Michelle Posey just said. And they use these forums to spread the information, that really the narratives that they want to promote, and much of which is overtly false. And then if anybody who challenges those narratives, they censor, they remove, they just kick out, so that those questions don't end up reaching the ears of their followers.
It's just a basic system right now where you can create folders for files. You can set up chat rooms. There's already a chat room. There's like a South Carolina chat room. I didn't look to see how many South Carolinians are on it right now, but I'm going to guess probably 500. Ask you for your time, they'll ask you for your money, they'll ask you to volunteer and make phone calls, but they'll never tell you about the precinct strategy and why becoming a voting member of your local committee is so important. So like I said, don't get mad, let's get even. Let's go out and recruit PCs. We all have to become recruiting machines. So
the pitch that they give, and so they say, America first, Americans must take over. This is his bottom line. I'll let him go.
Here's the key. America first, Americans must take over the Republican Party as their organizational tool for achieving their political goals. Period. That's all the Republican Party is. It's an organizational tool for us, conservatives. It has a conservative platform. But see, we haven't been...
So here's what's interesting. They don't really talk about what those political goals are beyond taking over the Republican Party. Beyond kicking out all of the rhinos. They don't talk about what the actual goals, their political goals are. And this is the parallels here to a communist takeover are very, very stark. In Idaho, I want to talk about Idaho because they have completed a takeover. They completed a takeover about 2 years ago in Idaho. Brent Regan, he took over an organization called Idaho Freedom Foundation, which was a PAC a pretty long established and well-funded PAC that is a conservative think tank in the state of Idaho. And he raised up and is kind of like the shadow operator behind Dorothy Moon, who's the state party chair. And Dorothy Moon is a frequent guest. She's really kind of a clone of Christina Caramo. Dorothy Moon, 107 had this coalition of Secretary of State candidates in leading up to the 2022 election. And there were, I think, 7 or 8. It was Keith Blandford who organized this event that Dan Schultz is speaking at. It was Christina Caramo here in Michigan, Dorothy Moon, Rachel Hamm in California, Mark Fincham in Nevada. I'm blanking on his name. Jim Marchant. And there were a handful of others. There's 7 or 8 of them. And they are all very much a part of this Flynn organization. But 107 organized it, and he used this as kind of an influence op to influence these people. And Dorothy Moon ended up becoming the state party chair, and in Idaho. And I've talked to a couple people in Idaho, in the Idaho Republican Party, who were at the last state convention. And at that convention, there's one county that is very much opposed to what Dorothy Moon and Brent Regan have done. And they just by fiat refused to seat this whole county, the whole county delegation at the state convention. Had that county been sat, it's very likely that Dorothy Moon would not have been reelected. But they just by fiat just refused to seat them. And the thing is that once they took power, they changed the state party bylaws so that they would have the power to do that. They created Article 20, which they have show trials to remove both elected officials and representatives of the party from the party for the crime of whatever they determined to be not believing or not abiding by the Republican Party platform, which the state party platform is a continuous moving goalposts, and they make it very radical and far right. And I believe that this is the in Idaho, the ranked choice voting was on the ballot, and it's gaining, even though it didn't pass, it's gaining momentum. That whole idea is gaining momentum because you can't win an election in Idaho unless you're Republican, and the Republican Party is controlled by these people that are really lunatics that, with these purity tests. And so more and more people are being alienated from this Republican Party. Ultimately, this is an operation to flip a deep red state blue. Bradley says the good old purity test, and that's exactly right. Farm Girl says, have you ever done a deep dive into that 107 character? Yeah, he is quite shady. I actually just talked to somebody who's been studying him and some people close to him for the last 5 years. We talked for 3.5 hours the other day. And it is 107 he is quite the operator. He's close with Thomas Schoenberger, and who is a particular area of concern. And I'm just going to leave it at that. That would be a conversation for another time. So let's get back to this video.
In it, we've let the rhinos run it. We got to get back into it. Look, 111 of those RNC members voted on the first ballot for Ronna Romney McDaniel. So we have to, all of us in this room have to go out and start recruiting those Trump supporters like crazy. This isn't going to solve things. Boat parades, rallies, car caravans, golf cart parades, all that stuff, it doesn't do anything unless it's used for recruiting precinct committeemen.
That's just such hogwash. There's just such hogwash. If that were true, then I mean, Trump would not have won this election. And this is the whole thing, that it's like it takes what the position is really about, which is, like I said, it's a position of responsibilities. The purpose of the precinct committeeman or precinct delegate position is to help Republicans get elected. That's the purpose. And it takes a lot of work. It is a lot of work to win an election for a candidate, to support candidates. You wear out your shoes knocking on doors, and it's a lot of work. There's all kinds of programs and organizing and getting people involved and making sure that people get out and vote. It is a ton of work. And it is not at all what he's saying, where you can just get a bunch of low information people that don't know much about anything, but they support Trump, and they might be angry about what's going on, and you get them into the party. And all they have to do is just go to a meeting a month. And if they can't make a monthly meeting, that's okay. Just go, when your vote is really needed. They're creating a collectivist voting bloc, and it's this position of, that you have the right to vote, you have the right to take over the party, you have the right to demand change, you have the right to hold your elected officials accountable. And but that's not what the position is. It's a position of responsibility, and they take it completely and turn it on its head. And part of that is their focus on instead of on what candidates and parties need to do in order to earn people's votes, they always just talk about grievance. I mean, really, they talk about grievance. And that's what election fraud is it is a grievance focused narrative, or pursuit.
And tell them, look, I'm not asking you to go to Valley Forge for the winter. I'm asking you for 3 hours a time a month, 3 hours. This is my 3-step strategy to restore America. Step 1, pray. I recommend 2 Chronicles 7:14. I won't read it now.
Okay, so this right here is the Bible verse that all the military intelligence operatives within the Republican Party, they all use to make themselves look like they're Christians, and to justify. And I'm going to read it, even though he doesn't want to read it, because I think that I don't know. I won't speculate as to why he didn't want to read it. I'll let you do that. It says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. So they use this as justification, this verse, and they're really pulling it out of context and distorting the meaning that it really has. I think that there is no such thing as bad scripture. All scripture is breathed out by God, including this. And if you truly understand that what this is humbling ourselves and turning from our wicked ways, looking at our sin, but that's not what they do. The context that they share this in is always focused on the sin of others instead of the sin of ourselves. And And they always have this outward focus towards other people's sin and other people's wickedness. And Michelle Swinick, for example, I have several videos of her just calling everybody that disagrees with her a demon. And that's what they do. They demonize, and this is not Christian. And so, you can call yourself a Christian, but if you claim that everybody that is a demon because they disagree with you, I think you really need to spend more time in the Word and humble yourself and look at your own sin. All right, let's go on.
Step 2, recruit precinct committeemen. Step 3, repeat. I can't guarantee you that if we fill up all the vacant precinct committeeman slots, I can't guarantee you that we're going to save the Republic if we do that. But I can guarantee you this. If we don't do that, bye-bye, Republic. It's gone. It's over with. Because
this is just so manipulative. It is so manipulative. And that's what they do. If you don't do this, we have to do this to save the country. That we have to do this to save the Republic. If we don't, I guarantee you, we could say bye-bye to our Republic, say bye-bye to our freedoms. Your children and grandchildren are going to live under communism. But the irony here is that that's part of what these people are creating. But that's the game. This is a psyop. This is just a manipulative psyop.
Nothing's going to change. We're going to keep electing uniparty people instead of real Republicans.
And you show up to a meeting and find out they've appointed people in your precinct. There's no meeting. There was no precinct meeting. What do you do about that?
What you do is you build a parallel organization. You can use that communications and collaboration platform that I showed you. You build a parallel off to the side. You keep going to the meetings if they'll let you attend.
So he's talking about what to do if you're in the minority and you can't take over the party, and they don't tolerate your Saul Alinsky tactics within the party. So he's saying, create a parallel organization, keep going to those meetings, but recruit and build up your parallel organization.
You got to outnumber them. There's a fundamental rule in party politics. The majority rules. The rhinos have been in the majority all this time because conservatives haven't been showing up. So you build you outnumber them. You find out how many there are in the particular committee that you want to be a member of. Find out how many there are, how many vacant slots there are, and then you build a coalition, a parallel group, and then the next time it's time to have the elections, like at caucus meetings, you flood the caucus meetings. And you outnumber them.
So, and he is providing the roadmap, and this is exactly what they did in Michigan. It's exactly what they did in Arizona. It's exactly what FRA is trying to do in Florida, and they have been. So back to, and Liberty, I apologize for not answering your question directly right at the beginning, but what they did there in Florida is the Republican Party sued FRA for abuse of the Republican name. And so what they were doing is they were putting out press releases that implied that they were actually the Republican Party, and with resolutions that were like very far right that would turn people off. And they were doing this during the run up to the election. And so the party sued and said, if you're going to act that way, you can't use the Republican name. And from what I understand, they're winning that lawsuit. And so they are removing the people from within the party that are FRA leaders and members that have been working against the interests of the Republican Party of Florida. And I think that is, I say kudos to them. I think that these people are not acting, they're demonstrating anti-Republican behavior. And what they're doing is they're trying. The crazy thing is that, Michelle Posey's, they're complaining about being purged But that's exactly, if you listen to Dan Schultz and what we just said, is he's talking about purging the party of the people that they call rhinos, which is everybody that's been there for more than 15 minutes, everybody that actually knows how to win elections. That in Florida, it's all the people within all of the volunteers within the Republican Party of Florida that have been there, because in the last 10 years, Florida has flipped from blue to red because of, in large part, because of the hard work of the people within the Republican Party, of those volunteers within the Republican Party. And those are the people that the Dan Schultz influenced operators within the Michelle Posies, and the people that are, who is, by the way, very close with Flynn, that all of them are going after the people who flipped Florida red, and they're pushing their Christian nationalism, which is repulsive to the majority of voters, right and left, and they act in such a way. It's like, I've talked about Christina Caramo, an example with her where there was an event that was held. So there were, here in Michigan, it was Tudor Dixon running for governor, Matt DePerno running for attorney general, and Christina Caramo running for secretary of state, excuse me. And they were what they had identified with the Trump team's help as the biggest weakness here in Michigan was white middle-class women. And so they wanted to do an event for not just white, but suburban middle-class women. And so they organized this event, and Trump's team told each of the candidates what they should focus on in their speech. Christina Caramo was supposed to go first because she was kind of the wild card, and then they didn't want her to be the last one, like the last taste in the voters, the people's mouths when they left. But she of course showed up late, so she ended up being the last speaker because she showed up so late. And she ended up talking, she made headlines because she talked about how yoga pants are demonic, and she talked about abortion. She was told, Trump told her to talk about the lines at the Secretary of State's office and how to make them shorter, and which is and just to keep it super simple. But she's going off on this Christian nationalist rant about abortion, about transgenders, about sex ed in schools, highly divisive topics that are really repulsive to, and I think deliberately so, to the audience that they're presenting to. And that's just one example, but that I've seen that example play out nationwide. And it's all under the example and the tactics that Dan Schultz is exhibiting here.
There's about 400,000 precinct committeeman slots in the Republican Party, okay? And about 200,000 are vacant, okay? And then they're split right now between moderates and conservatives. There's a war going on. It's still in Arizona, and in some of the committees we have the rhinos versus the conservatives, okay? Well, you change that over.
And what I've seen, that right there is a complete lie. What I have seen is, I've talked to people in Republican parties throughout the country, is the people that are targeted, because the so-called grassroots people, the people that Dan Schultz would call conservatives here, they don't want to talk to me, because just like Flynn, he won't talk to a journalist that's going to ask them challenging questions. And I had one conversation with Shelby Bush, and I tried to make it count, and of course she never responded to me after that. I've tried Caroline Wren, Carrie Lake. I have their cell phone numbers. They won't respond. When I'm doing a story, I want their comment, and I want to give them the opportunity to comment, but they won't even comment. And I've seen that over and over, everywhere that I've looked. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I love, I love talking to people. And I'd have some challenging questions, and I'd be interested in their answers, but they don't tend to want to talk to me. So the people and that's one of the red flags. If somebody's an honest dealer, especially in politics, they're happy to talk to the media, and they're able to engage in a debate, and they could defend their ideas. But you don't see that here. You don't see the willingness to engage and defend ideas, and to go into difficult questions. This is not an ideological thing. What Dan Schultz just said, this is conservatives versus moderates. No, that is not what it is, because really, truly, the Republican Party is a conservative party. Now, there are moderates within the party for sure. There are people within the party that really believe that the military intelligence complex is a good thing and that it's necessary to defend ourselves. And that we need to engage in foreign wars, and that they bought into the Ukraine thing. I mean, there are people within our party that do believe that. I think that they're the vast minority, but there are very few Republicans in this cycle. I can only think of two that I have met and they're not even in the party anymore. They've stepped away from the party because they were attacked so much. But there's only two people that I can think of that I've met in the whole country that are party operatives whose hatred of Trump was so strong that they just could not vote for him. Everybody else that I have met supports Trump, and it's not just Trump. They support the platform. They are conservative. So this is not conservative versus rhinos or conservative versus moderates. It's not ideological. This is a 100% a power struggle. This is an effort by this grassroots people that are low information, that don't know how to win elections. And they think they've been indoctrinated into the idea that that they're now an elected official because they have their a precinct. They're a duly elected official. They often say those words because they're a precinct delegate, but that's not the case. They're a volunteer within the party. This is a volunteer organization. And even though it's on the ballot in many states, like it is here in Michigan, you have to get elected to be a precinct delegate here in Michigan. But if the way that the laws and the bylaws are set up, if you, especially under state law, it's not viewed as an elected position. You're not an employee of the state or the local government or anything once you're elected. It is purely a volunteer position. And the Democrats, in their bylaws in the state of Michigan, if I wanted to go in and I could do a Dan Schultz thing, and I could start using leftist language, which would be very difficult to train myself to do, but I'm sure I could study enough to do it if this were a priority to me, or if I were getting paid enough to do it, and I thought, yeah, this is a good thing, then I could go and become a Democrat precinct delegate, and I could get a whole bunch of people with me, and we could take over the Democrat Party. And we could create a bunch of chaos and destroy the party, weaken the party, drain the party of all of its talent and treasure, and turn all the donors away so that the Republicans could win. And that's the way that we're going to, save the country. So, if I wanted to do that, I couldn't. I simply couldn't, because the Democrat bylaws are such that when you're an elected precinct delegate here in Michigan, you have no rights at all. You have to demonstrate with your actions, by doing the work, by knocking on doors, by putting in the hours, putting in the time, and demonstrating too, by doing that you are in fact a Democrat. You got to demonstrate that you are in fact a Democrat. And if you don't do that, if you don't want to work, then you don't even have the right to vote. And so I mean, there's the ideological thing. Like in a lot of ways, the Democrat bylaws are more Republican than the Republican bylaws. In the Republican bylaws, you're entitled to vote, and they use that entitlement to present this grievance case, just like Michelle Posey was doing, saying that I'm a victim of this purge, that they don't want me anymore. This is undemocratic. They sound just like Democrats. But if the bylaws were written the way the Democrat bylaws were written, then they wouldn't have the opportunity to vote and take over the party in the first place. Monster Louis says majority rule is not how our constitutional republic is supposed to work. Exactly. Change the graphic on the screen. All right.
Night, when you flood into all those vacancies, Trump people. So the Trump people are very active. They're go find the Trump people, go find the Second Amendment people, go find the right to life people, go find all the people Go through our party, we have a good party platform. Go through the party platform and look at all the issues. Go to those groups and recruit. And especially the MAGA people, the people who like, I love Trump and I want to buy another hat. Okay, go tell those people you got to do more than just buy another hat. You got to come to our meeting.
What was that small percentage you said?
0.3% of 74 million is a little more than 200,000. That's all we need. That's right.
To flip this thing.
Yes. Thank you.
That's all that's needed. Just 200,000 volunteers. That's nothing at all. It's just simple to flip this thing and save this country. But I think that this is just a little example of how effective the PSYOP is. And it is a PSYOP. It is it's manipulation. A PSYOP is psychological operation. It's an effort, a coordinated, well-planned campaign to build a cohort, and that to use and to mass, to create a mass, like he says. And the word that they use internally is a cohort. A cohort. I was actually back on March 2nd of this year at the state convention in Michigan. I was approached by Jason Ikes, who is an attorney, an operative for an employee of the America Project, and has been, I believe, since the beginning. He was running at the time for U.S. House. He ended up taking third place in the primary, and I think he might have bowed out even before the primary. I don't know, but that wasn't what it was about. He came up to me. He wanted to. I've never at that point up to that point I had never had somebody want to be my friend, act like they wanted to be my friend so strongly. But he came to me and he just he zeroed in on me, and I was talking with a group of people and he just kind of dominated. Everybody else left. I ended up talking to the guy for 2 hours, and he was, it was very clear that he was trying to get me to trust him and to listen to him and to develop a relationship where he could, in my view, handle me. But the first thing that he said was really, really interesting. He said, what you have to do if you want to have power and influence of any kind, whether it's in the media or in the party and politics, is you have to have a cohort, and that cohort will do whatever you tell them to do. And you have to build that cohort, and you have to do so systematically and deliberately and intentionally. And if you're nothing without your cohort, and you need as large a cohort as possible to, the bigger the cohort, the more power and influence you're going to have. And I think that was a tremendous window into the thinking of these people. I wholeheartedly reject it. I'm not trying to create a cohort. I am just sharing information and encouraging you to do what you choose to do with it. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a link to a Swinnick video. Bradley says, this is what Flynn was talking about. This was like an insurgency. Yes, exactly. This was absolutely run like an insurgency, and it is an insurgency. I've been saying that really all along, that this is how I got into this, was looking at what happened to the Michigan Republican Party. Why was it so divided? Why was this group of Republicans who all support Trump, all of them support Trump? I hadn't talked to a single operative. One of the two is here in Michigan, but he's not in a position of influence. I hadn't talked to any operative within or delegate on any level within the Michigan Republican Party who didn't support Trump. I talked to some who didn't like him, but they'd still plan to vote for him. But there were very few. The ones who were trying to remove, or the ones that were trying to remove Christina Caramo, they all supported Trump. They were all Trump supporters. And it wasn't just about Trump. It was also, and these people said that they claim that they're the only grassroots. They claim they're the only Christians. But what I realized is that this is an insurgency. And I think this video right here that I just shared, and Dan Schultz is really, kind of at the nexus of this whole thing, because I realized as I started looking at Arizona, Idaho, South Carolina, Oregon, Washington, Nebraska, Texas, Florida, they use the same language, they use the same tactics. And so I thought there's got to be something common. And I remember very clearly Dan Schultz, because I used to listen to Bannon's War Room all the time. And I, from the very beginning up until about 2022, I stopped listening. But it, so I remember Dan Schultz when I went back to that. And then I found this video right in the middle of a One Network operation to try to take over the state party in South Carolina. And and this is the roadmap. This is like the meat right in the middle of the sandwich of that whole, right in the middle of that presentation. And I think that was the most important part of that whole event. So because it really, this was their roadmap for how they're going to take over the party, and he lays it all out. So I hope that's helpful for you as far as some background. And if you're not involved in the Republican Party, I strongly recommend it. I think that, I am, now I'm a statutory member of my county Republican Party. I plan to run for the district executive committee. I don't know if I'll get it or not, but I recommend getting involved. I think Christians should get involved in local politics, as long as they truly are called, and that they're called, that you are called, if you can exhibit the fruit of the Spirit even as you're doing it. But these people that claim to be Christians, they act like Michelle Swinnick, yelling and screaming that people are demons. That's not the fruit of the Spirit. So, and I don't mean to isolate Michelle Swinnick, but she's been brought up in the comments here. She's one of many. Christina Caramo did the same thing. I played an audio recording of her saying that everybody that worked to remove her is demonic and satanic, and they're all going to hell, and they're all liars, and the enemies of God. And all the people in this room that support me, you're good people, you're good Christians, and we're the only Christians in the party. And that is not, there's nothing Christian about that. So, that's what's going on. That is, and it's all tied to Flynn. And ultimately, I believe that is tied to, I think that part of the objective of this was being able to take over the national convention from the floor. And they were preparing for that. They were training for that. And Flynn was in a position where he could have taken over the convention from the floor if Trump weren't there. So I don't know if that was deliberate on his part or not, but he was in that position. And I'll go with this comment and then we're going to close. Monster Louis says psychological manipulation is rooted in satanic principles, essentially witchcraft. And I agree. I think that even, that there was a lot of manipulation in that presentation that Dan Schultz just gave. And, this is, they're talking about creating a mass, creating a collectivist voting bloc, creating a cohort. He doesn't use that word, but that is what they're creating, which is a cult. It is a cult. And it operates like a cult. And so, I praise the Republican Party of Florida for taking the initiative. And, it's not easy to remove those who are very vocal and very much creating problems. And so I'm glad that they're doing that. I've seen that the similar thing has been going on in Arkansas, and I started looking into that. And I wouldn't say that, Arkansas is interesting. There was this huge fist fight in a meeting. I think it was Saline County. And I think that a bunch of the people that were involved on both sides of that were removed. I don't understand the whole story. So, I'm not even going to speak to that, what happened in Arkansas yet. I've been asked about it, but, so I will leave it there. Went a little bit over here, but it was good. It was totally worth it. I appreciate all of you. And, I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow, but I am going to make some changes. I'm going to kind of step back a little bit and do one show a week and one paid for paid subscribers a week, and that's going to free me up to work on another project that I think you all benefit from, but I need to be able to devote some more time to that project. And I am about to get sworn in as county commissioner, and that's going to take some more of my time as well. So I'm just going to step back, do one show a week starting next week on Mondays, and a paid show on Wednesdays. And I'm still going to be here, and still going to be available and all that, but just to free up a little bit more time for some projects that I think are going to be really good. And Farm Girl says, thanks. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you all.